At the end of the day, Osterberg Entertainment were not the type of people you broke away from cleanly. With all the weird shit that Norman had been through, he would have been content to never go back to the LaCroix building again. But with the CEO of the company taking a personal interest in him and all but threatening to drop in on him at his house, he had to take that seriously. He considered buying a gun, but not only did he not have a firearms card, he didn't have the time to legally obtain one. And he wasn't the type of guy that knew how to work outside of the law. He settled on bringing a knife, then rethought that decision on account of not knowing how to use it or where to put it. He went with a box cutter. It was simple enough that he didn't feel as if he'd accidentally cut himself just carrying it. After the disaster with Brody Danger, whatever he was, he didn't think he was getting out of this alive and awkwardly wrote a note for his mother to find if he did not return. In the end of the day, this weirdness made him assess his life and really look at it objectively. He didn't believe that he really got a chance to live it. He got to work at 7 a.m. and even looking at the monitor on the top 20 floors displaying a Roman eye sent a shiver down his spine. It was almost as if the eye were following him. Norman looked around as nervously as a rabbit who knew that most things that existed in the world wanted to eat them. As far as things went, he wouldn't have been able to separate this day from any other day he had had here up till now. The only thing that was different was the knowledge that there were monsters here. He clocked in and began his work in the mailroom as per usual, and was waiting for any moment Brody Danger or the creature fused together into the camera to appear. He noticed that Carlos wasn't there, and in fact, there was no one there. This wasn't completely odd because there were times that all of the mailroom may have been making deliveries. But after an hour, it became odd that no one just happened to show up. There was no idle conversation, only the droning of machine noise. The unusual silence was deafening, and he could no longer take the waiting. He dared to sort the mail and started his rounds throughout the building early. He usually did the floors concurrently because that was the most efficient way to, but he decided to break from the norm and went directly to the 13th floor. He moved amongst the producers and pitchmen. People moved about too busy to be bothered by the likes of him, absorbed by the majesty of their phones and the sounds of their own voices. He dropped off pieces of mail here and there to people who barely acknowledged his presence. As he passed an office whose door was open, he thought he saw Carlos wearing a suit. He stopped and backed up to confirm what he had seen. There, clear as day, was Carlos sitting at a desk at his computer typing. As relieved as Norman was to see Carlos was alive, he was also unnerved to see him here. "Hey, what up, buddy?" said Carlos gleefully. Norman slowly looked both ways down the hall before closing his door. "What happened to you? After, you know," said Norman in a conspiratorial whisper. "Oh, that, nothing. Brody was mad for a minute, roughed me up a little for hitting him. Then I got a call and they said they liked our test footage. So they offered me a job as a junior associate producer. I'm sorta surprised you didn't get one." Norman thought about it, and he quite possibly may have, but he had his phone turned off and didn't bring it with him, so if they did leave a message, he wouldn't have gotten it. "You took the job? Even after all the freaky shit we saw? Even after what Brody did?" Norman asked urgently. Carlos was so calm about it that it made Norman seem unhinged by comparison. "All that? Come on, man. I talked to Brody and even he said maybe he shouldn't have went off the rails." "And the cameraman?" Carlos shrugged as if it just wasn't as big a deal to him as it was to Norman. "You should probably talk to the boss. She can probably get you that job still. I could pull you in now that I'm in. We're boys, right?" Carlos said, extending his fist for a bump. Norman reluctantly bumped fists. Norman didn't know what to do or how to handle any of the things he was currently dealing with, so he waited for it to come to him. Perhaps he was making more out of this than he needed to. Perhaps this was just an odd one-time event that was a fluke of fate that would not repeat itself. If the company really wanted him dead or worse, what could he do about it? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So he went back to work and waited for the other shoe to drop. After an entire work week, things normalized and the mailroom seemed much like the mailroom, and they even ended up hiring someone to replace Carlos's old position. Aside from the occasional workplace freakout, there wasn't anything overtly supernatural going on. Norman did make it a point not to pitch ideas, so the chances of rising higher in the company was a non-issue. When he had thought that things had normalized, it was something as simple as an opened door that pulled him back into madness. Norman was painfully aware of the plethora of hidden passages that ran all throughout the building. So when he got to work, on a day like any other, there was a slightly cracked door open that he had no prior knowledge of right behind the mailroom cove he worked. He sorted the mail and attempted to ignore it, but throughout the day, he heard odd moans and wails distantly. He closed his eyes in contemplation. He wanted to let it go. He wanted to put his head down and mind his own f***ing business. But it felt every time he tried, things got a little odder until he absolutely had to address it. "I just can't think of anything, okay?" He heard someone yelling from a great distance. Norman got up, left his post, and listened to the slightly cracked open door for greater context. "Please, can anybody hear me? Is anybody out there?" The voice cried for help. Norman nearly closed the door, but the decent part of him, the part that was human, couldn't ignore a cry for help. He put his fingers in the cracks of the door and ventured in.